So yesterday morning when I woke up, I noticed that there was this trend going on Twitter, Dungeons and Dragons, Open D&D, trending on Twitter amid homebrew rumor controversy. And this article at Game Rant popped up, and I read through it, and basically it's talking about how, and I'm gonna have the article linked below for those of you who want to read it. But basically, it's talking about how Wizards of the Coast is rumored not to be renewing the Open game license, and they invited a bunch of playtesters who they made sign NDAs. So people were, all up in arms and freaking out about things. And I said that to my brother at like 6:45 in the morning yesterday morning, and went away and did stuff. Came back at noon and noticed that there was a article up at D&D Beyond on the OGL, SRDs, and 1D&D. Now, what's very interesting is that this hasn't actually been officially published on the Wizards of the Coast website, but over at D&D Beyond's website, which is, of course, now owned and operated by Wizards of the Coast. And they actually give some clarity to this because they literally state in the opening statements, "We love the interest and passion the community has for D&D. We love D&D too. So when we see the D&D community concerned by rumors and misunderstandings, we want to clear the air and share the facts with you, even if it's a bit earlier than our original plan. You all matter to us, and we want to provide transparency on how D&D will continue supporting third-party creators. So here are the facts." Now I'm going to read through this. But what's important here is that it doesn't specifically mention homebrew, which is what affects me. It does refer to content creators in general who are using D&D as a platform. I'm assuming this applies to homebrew as well. We're going to know more as the rules become clearer. There are 3 points towards the end, which I think are going to apply to everybody, but there's one point in particular out of those 3 points that I'm confused about. So we'll talk about that at the end, and I guess we'll find out more as things go along. Worth noting is that the world that my wife and my brother have, which is the world of the Weave and the Void, was originally designed as its own thing. I originally started playing back in the day with second edition AD&D, and I really liked that, but I had made my own hybrid version over the years. And when we originally started creating that world and we, were building the video game and the book series and the tabletop setting, we originally were going to use my homebrew rules. And when we started getting into the legality of selling something as a product, we found that it was going to be much easier to just go with fifth edition as a rule set and use the OGL because it reduced the risks and made it a lot easier for us to sell a commercial product without needing to go through a bunch of legal loops and jump through hoops to try to create our own original system from scratch. And the 5th edition OGL is really simple to navigate. Just copy and paste, put those in your book at the end, and you're good to go. Like, it was really simple to deal with. The new rules are not going to be as simple. They claim that it's going to be the same, but it's not because they've added another layer of responsibility if you're going to be creating content using their rule set, which makes me wonder, do I need to worry about going back to my original plan, even though we've already had this out now since May of, we launched the source book and the first campaign in May of 2022, and we've been live streaming that campaign on Sundays for quite some time now. So anyway, I digress. Let's read through this. So, will 1D&D include an SRD and be covered by LGL? Yes, that's the short version. All existing creator content that is compatible with 5th edition will also be compatible with 1D&D. Secondly, we're updating the SRD for 1D&D as we complete its development. This development is informed by the results of playtests that were conducted with hundreds of thousands of D&D players. Now, will the LGL terms change? Yes. The new version is going to be released in early 2023. And this is what makes sense here. And this is something that, people are freaking out about, but they kind of need to understand how it's actually going to work. And I understand what they're getting here, so we're going to dive into the legal terminology here. Essentially, as they say, it needs an update to ensure that it keeps doing what it was intended to do, which is allow the D&D community's independent creators to build and play and grow the game we all love without allowing things like third parties to mint D&D NFTs and large businesses to exploit our intellectual property. That's fine, absolutely fine. They own it, it's their thing. They do need to protect their intellectual property. So what's changing? It says first, we're making sure that OGL 1.1 is clear what it covers and what it doesn't. It makes it clear that it covers material created for use in or as a TTRPG. tabletop role-playing game, and those materials are only ever permitted as printed media or static electric files like EPUBs and PDFs. Other types of content, such as videos and video games, are only possible through the Wizards of the Coast fan content policy or a custom agreement with us. To clarify, outside of printed media and static electronic files, the OGL doesn't cover it. So this kind of concerns me because other types of content like videos and video games, okay, so video games I can understand, but what about videos? How does that apply to people who live stream? Because that's a video. So this is very important. What does this mean for the people who live stream their D&D campaigns or their homebrew campaigns? Because it says here video. And now they're saying something about they're going to need to go through the fan content policy, which and that's a whole other thing, which we'll link below. Will this affect the D&D content and services players use today? It shouldn't. Top VTT platforms like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds and Foundry VTT, etc., already have custom agreements. D&D merchandise like minis and novels were never intended to be a part of the OGL, and OGL 1.1 will change that. Okay. It says second, we're updating the OGL to offer different terms to creators who choose to make free share-alike content and creators who want to sell their products, which are people like me and my brother and my wife. What does this mean for you as a creator? If you're making share-alike content, nothing. Very little is going to change. If you're making commercial content, relatively little is going to change. But here's the new things you need to do. And these are the 3 new terms. You need to accept the licensing terms and let us know what you're offering for sale. So now there is an oversight committee that's going to be stepping in and saying, what are you doing with our rule set? We need you to report that to us. And here's the most important thing. If you don't report it to them, they have the legal right to come after you because you're using their rule set. So yeah, you're going to have to tell them this is what we have available. This is what we're doing. Secondly, so it's no longer going to be just enough to copy and paste the OGL and put it into your source book and sell it. You're going to have to do that and you're going to have to report it to them so that they can take a look at it, which means they're going to have the oversight to be able to come back and say, we don't like that, or that. You need to change that because you're breaking the rules. You're not doing it according to the way that we want things to do. I'm not a fan of oversight. Really not a fan of oversight. Second, it says you need to report any OGL related annual revenue if you make more than $50,000 a year. That's very important because a lot of people are making money off of their homebrew stuff, and there are a lot of companies, like let's say the people who make the Middle Earth games. That's a 5th edition rule set independent product. There's also companies like um, the D&D, what are they called? The DM dudes, or is it DM Dave's one of them though? DM Dave's definitely one of them. There's another one I can't remember what it's called now. They've run a couple of Kickstarters and they've made a few $1 million. And there's also the Critical Role people and so on and so forth. Um, what's noticed is here, and then number 3 is included creator product badge in your work, which is the one that I'm also interested in. So what it says here is that only if you make more than $50,000 a year do you have to report your revenue, and then it says here for the fewer than 20 creators worldwide who make more than $750,000 in income a year, we will add a royalty starting in 2024. So even for the creators making significant money selling D&D supplements and games, no royalties are due in 2023, and all revenue below $750,000 in future years will be royalty free. But if you're someone who's in the top 20%, 20%, sorry, they have apparently went out there and researched and said there are 20 creators who I'm sure Critical Role's out there and other ones. Those of you who are making more than $750,000 a year in revenue using our open game license, you're going to owe us royalties starting in 2024. If you're not making $750,000, that's fine. You don't owe us anything, but you do have to report your revenue to us annually. If you're making over $50,000. Now, a lot of this is throwing red flags up for me because terms of service, like the open game license, are fully modifiable by them when and if they want. So they could very easily decide in 2024 that they're going to modify this and they're going to say, well, now if you make more than $20,000, you have to start paying us a commission. $750,000 is very generous. This is very similar to the way that the Unreal Store or Epic does it with their games in Unreal. You could make up to $1 million before you start owing them any royalties. That's very fair. So I think having you $750,000 of revenue before you actually have to start paying them a royalty. That's fair. Um, it is them tightening the screws though, and that's got a lot of people concerned. It has me slightly concerned. I'm not a big enough fish to have to worry about it, but I don't like oversight. I don't like needing to report to them what I'm doing, how much money I'm making, or what I'm doing with my independent product, which has nothing to do with them other than the fact that it uses a rule set that is common enough that many people use it. And I could create my own rule set, but the problem is that they have the right to then look at my rule set and say, oh, you're using a roll 20, you're using a die, you're using a 20-sided die in your system and 6-sided die, and you're using the 20 as an attack roll. They can then claim that, oh, well, you're similar to us, similar enough that people might be confused that what you're doing is the same thing as D&D, and therefore we're going to sue you in court. So that's one of the reasons why the OGL was easier than creating your own law, from scratch. There's a reason why there's not that many rule sets out there. So I don't know. It's interesting to me. It's not hugely concerning because we're not making tons of money at the moment because we're a small enterprise, but it is something that's worth looking at as we continue to grow our business and say, well, how's this going to affect the long-term business of it? Meanwhile, they have this content policy that's been in place um, since 2017, which you need to look through and realize that fan content is a little different than official modules and other things. And so, in terms of what they're talking about here, um, videos and video games are only possible through the Wizards of the Coast fan content policy. So this is when we get into stuff like what we've been doing. You have to make it very clear that since it's homebrew, um, you can't use their logos and trademarks. Um, you can't mess with legal notices in their stuff. And it says if you're incorporating Wizards IP into your fan content and it already has copyright notices, logos, trademarks, etc., you can't remove them. You can't use your IP in other games, um, etc. Um, and IP is different than the OGL. IP is very important. IP is things like Baldur's Gate. That's an IP. You can't use Baldur's Gate in any of your fan content. What's really confusing here is how this is going to, um, yeah, how's it going to affect people who stream, like Critical Role and the Dungeon Dudes? Is that what they're called? I think it's what they're called. Anyway, who knows? It's a confusing mess right now. It has a lot of people in the homebrew community concerned and upset. I like the fact that they at least gave us some clarity with the fact that this is going to be the main things that are happening in terms of, you know, you're gonna have to start doing annual reporting. You're gonna owe royalties. You make over 750. The third one that concerns me though is the include a creator product badge on your work. That one has me confused because what does that mean? Does that only apply to people who are creating third-party D&D supplement material, or does this also apply to people who are doing homebrew? Because all of this is posted at the D&D Beyond website, and as far as I understand, D&D Beyond is only for third-party D&D stuff. So if you're creating for the Forgotten Realms or Eberron or Dragonlance, you're going to be putting your stuff on D&D Beyond, as I understand it. It's all going to be done through. But what about folks like us who have completely independent, um, worlds that are homebrew worlds that are our worlds and our intellectual property, and we're just using the rule set through the OGL? Why would I want to create something why would I want to put a creator product badge on that work, which is why I think that part maybe only applies to official D&D Beyond stuff, or does all of this only apply to D&D Beyond stuff? It's not very clear yet what that means for true third-party homebrew campaigns that are independent from the intellectual properties that Wizards of the Coast have set up through like D&D Beyond, and we're just truly creating stuff out there. What about the Middle Earth game, or DM Dave doing stuff, or the Dungeon Dudes, or that company from Australia who does the horror gothic one that has run the Kickstarters. I can't believe I can't remember the name of their campaign world right now. There's a lot of companies out there who have interesting worlds and IPs. Celeste is another good one. They have their own fifth edition now based on the video game. What does it mean for all of those creators? That's what I'm really confused and concerned and want to know more about. So I'm eagerly awaiting news like everybody else. It's a very interesting time to be living in, and it remains to be seen if we're going to be continuing to use 1D&D moving forward, or if we decide to move away. If it becomes too complex, we may just discontinue our tabletop setting and just have it be the setting for our video game and book series. You never know. Um, I'll be watching this with interest. Let me know your thoughts below, everybody. If you've got more insight or information into the new upcoming rules and rule sets and how this applies to true homebrew creators like myself, let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon to get more information like this. And don't forget to support if you can. You can do super thanks on videos like these. You could also join as a member. You can do super chats and stickers on the live streams. Don't forget the Patreon page if you want to know more about that point and click game, our 5th edition tabletop setting, and our book series. We'll see you in the next video.